Hey, I just wanted to record this section separately. It's about the reason that we don't have points ever equal a fixed thing like days or hours or weeks. You'll see at the end of this why that's so important. And so I wanted to separate this out so you can come back to it yourself later and watch it, brush up on it yourself, maybe share it with your friends, because it's critically important that you never make this crucial mistake or it'll mess up the whole point of using points. Now, a few precautions, things that you should not do. Never, ever, ever have points equal hours or days or any fixed element, right? This exclamation point equals, if you are not a developer, means does not equal. Right? Developers know that that means does not equal. So story points do not equal hours ever. The reason for that is in points estimation, time is a derived function, not a direct correlation. All right, I'll explain what that means. Direct correlation means that 1 point equals 1 day, 2 days, whatever. A derived function means time is a function of points and velocity. So either one of those two numbers could be different, and the time number would be different. Velocity really is just your points per iteration. So your average number of points per iteration. Usually it's a rolling average of the last 3 sprints that you've done, but that's up to interpretation, whatever you as a team agree to. What happens then is you have a dynamic schedule indicator, right? Instead of a fixed schedule indicator. Fixed schedule indicator means you give that thing a points value and the schedule never changes, right? So if I have points equal, 1 point equals 1 day, and I have a backlog that has 300 points in it, then it's nice for me and for the executives or whoever, because they can just look at it and go, look, 300 points, 300 days, done. Okay, I can figure that out. I don't have to do this crazy math. But you have to do the crazy math, because if you don't, you lose the value of doing points, and why go through the effort? So if you decide that you want to have points equal hours, don't bother with the rest of the effort. It's not worth it. Here's the reason. I think I just said all these things. If a point is 8 hours, then a point will always be 8 hours. It never changes. You are tied like this guy, shackled, right? An 8-point story is 8 days for now and forevermore. It will never change. But here's why this is so important, right? Imagine you're in iteration 19. You're a team, got 5 people, you're in iteration number 19. Maybe you got 8 or 10 people, I don't care. And right now you have just come across a story that in your points poker came up with an 8-point story. Great, we have an 8-point story. Your current velocity is 16 points per sprint. Your sprints are 2 weeks long, 10 working days, so 16 points per sprint. That's your velocity. So if you look at the math, right, here's the function. Time equals points divided by velocity. So 8 points divided by 16 points per iteration gives you 1/2 of an iteration. You see how that works? So this 8-point story is going to take you half an iteration to get it done, or it's going to take you 5 days, approximately. Okay, if you have any problems with that, stop now, go back and re-listen to it, understand this before we go on to the next example, because you have to understand how you calculated this in order to get to the next, why it's so important. So your velocity is 16 points per week, per sprint. You divide your number of points by the velocity, and that gives you your time estimation. Okay? All right, so you get to this point. And you're much farther down the road. You run into a story that's the same, very, very similar at least, to that first 8-point story. X and Y, they're very, very similar stories. But we've been together a long time, right? We as a team have been working together. We've become more effective. We've become much more efficient. I understand the code. You understand the code better. we've worked in the domain. We understand the customer's needs a heck of a lot better than we used to. We understand how each other works together. So imagine, for example, that you're a front end and I'm a back end developer. And we work everywhere in the code, but just in general, we work front and back end. And we come to this story. Now, we worked on the first story, and we sat down when we got the story, and we sat down for about 2 hours and hashed out, okay, you and I haven't worked together much. Here's how I work on the back end. Here's what it's going to look like, where the data is going to be available, and how you can pick it up to transport it to the front end. Okay, this is how we'll do it in the front end, and what I'll pass back to you in the back end. We'll use this to connect, and so we have an hour, 2 hour conversation about this 8-point story to talk about how it's going to interconnect and how you and I are going to work together on it. We get down the road, we're at sprint 25, and we run into another story that's really similar. And so you and I sit down. Do we take an hour or 2 hours again? What do you think? Are we going to spend that same amount of time? Of course not. Right? We're going to look at it and go, hey, this is a lot like story X. Yeah, it is. It really looks like story X a lot. So you want to just do what we did on that one? Work things pretty much the same way. Yeah, totally. We've learned a little bit since then, and so I'll do this way and that a little bit different. Yeah, okay, that's cool. That makes sense. So just like we did. Okay, cool. So a 1 to 2 hour conversation now becomes a 15-minute, 5-minute conversation. Right? 5 to 15-minute conversation. Much more effective, much more efficient. We've gone through the storming, forming, norming. We are now performing, right? We are a team that's on fire. So we're here now. Our velocity has doubled because we're so much more effective as a team. We're now doing 32 points per sprint. 32 points per 2-week iteration, right? So if you take that 8-point story and you divide it by 32 points per iteration, it'll give you 1/4 of an iteration, or 2.5 days. Wow. Okay, can you see the difference here? If we had left 1 point equals 1 day, then we would have wound up with this story still being 5 days or whatever. If we had said a 5-point or an 8-point story is 1 week's worth of work. That's the way we had defined it. Okay, we'll make 8-point stories. That's about a week's worth of work. Okay, then by the time we got to iteration 25, and we're rocking and rolling, we were working so much better together. And I look at the scheduler, some executive is going to go report to the customer, how are we doing? Are we going to get this on time? Are we still on schedule? They would have said, here's what we're doing. Here's our current schedule. Or they would have come to you and said, hey, we need you to update the schedule, update the estimates to make sure that they're accurate, because you know that they're not. But because we use relative estimation and we abstract it from time and we let velocity be our time metric and we use a function of the two, we get ourselves a dynamic schedule indicator instead of a static schedule indicator. It allows us to, on a sprint-by-sprint basis, to update the schedule and provide that information to leadership without having to stop our work and go re-estimate crap. Because if you're like me, you've done that, right? You're 6 months into a project and some leader says, hey, I need to update the such and such for the board presentation that we're doing next month. Get me an updated schedule, and everyone has to stop work and go estimate. This stops that from having to happen. So I'm a little bit passionate about making it work this way because this is what works. Again, if you're not going to make it a dynamic schedule indicator by having points be separate from time, don't bother with points. Just call them days. Just go back to the way you used to do things in Waterfall, because it's not using the value that you have in this kind of tool. A little passionate there. A few anti-patterns. A, never have points equal hours. B, points don't compare across projects, and duration varies depending on the team, right? You can't compare points across projects or points across teams because every team is going to be different. That's why it's so important to have the people who are doing the work be the ones that estimate the work. It's really clear when I do classes, because we'll do points estimation this exact game as a group, and we do it doing dog clipping, dog grooming exercise, and each one of the teams has different experience with dog grooming, and so they will have completely different points estimations for their stories, or for each of the dogs that they're going to be grooming for the Westminster Dog Show, right? Some people have experience with grooming and can make accurate assessments of, yeah, this kind of dog, bites, and this kind of dog is really mellow, and this kind of hair you just wash it out, and this kind of hair you have to brush out for 4 hours. And they have knowledge that other teams don't have. And so when we come back together at the end of the exercise, it's great because I have them say, okay, who got, how many points did you get on this one? Oh, we got 5, we got 8, we got 3. Okay, which one's right? The answer is all of them are right. They're right for that team with their skills. So points don't compare across teams. Never have someone else do the points estimation. You have to do it for your team, because you are the ones that have the skills that are going to be doing the execution on that. So, and they don't compare across projects for the same reasons, right? And